Hello everyone, I hope you're all keeping well, healthy and happy. In this video I'm going to talk about the problem of Afghanistan. Because it is enormously complicated. I've been listening to a lot of the commentators and reading a lot of their opinions as well. Some of them are very well regarded, but they seem to be missing key facts about what is happening in Afghanistan. Okay? And so a whole bunch of people don't understand that region. They don't understand that country. And they're getting a whole bunch of things mixed up. Okay? And we'll go into what these are further through this video. But I'll also say this. That those of you who have been subscribed to my channel, okay, those of you who have been watching my videos, will know that I have been very strongly and vehemently against any military action in North Korea and in Syria. And I've detailed the reasons why as well, okay? So, I'm completely opposed to warfare which would lead to serious global destabilization, okay, which would lead to the destruction of the countries in which we live in the West. Okay, I've been totally opposed to those things. But Afghanistan is a special case, okay, and I mean that in every sense of the word, right? Because what you have with Afghanistan are a series of complicated events that took place as a direct result of idiotic foreign policy that has been pursued over the last 16 years by the United States primarily, okay? And this was done by the State Department with the blessing of the State Department, right? They were in control of everything that was going on, including the protection of poppy fields in Afghanistan, which gave rise to the raw opium trade, which gave rise to all the various smuggling operations that were happening right across the world with heroin. Okay? But we'll get into that. But the main point I want to stress, though, is that the actions of the Bush administration and the actions of the Obama administration in particular have led to a complete breakdown in terms of strategy for how to best resolve the Afghanistan conflict. Okay? And so what you had was a very bad, a badly constructed, rough guide in terms of strategy, which didn't work. And let me tell you what that was. The strategy they were pursuing was to pay the Afghan militants, the Afghan insurgents. Those were basically the terrorists, by the way, right? The idea was to pay them so that they were on side with the United States, okay? Because that's worked remarkably well in the past in other regions. What they failed to take into account was the theocratic nature of Islamist countries. Okay? Once they go into that theocratic governmental structure, once they become that, you can't remake them into a vision of American democracy, which is what they tried to do. Okay? It doesn't work. Because the belief systems those people hold, they hold to them so strongly that convincing those people that they're wrong is virtually impossible. Okay, I am not kidding. It is virtually impossible to deprogram them. Right? Therefore, the United States should not even have tried. But they did this, right? And they did this for two reasons. One, because the State Department is directly aligned with Russia and China. And I'm not talking about everyone at the State Department, but the people that hold the real power inside the State Department are fully and completely aligned with Moscow and Beijing. Now, you won't hear anyone else say that. Okay? You won't hear anyone else say that, because what has happened, and it's not the fault of these other commentators, by the way. It's really not. They're doing their best to provide you with good information. What has happened, though, is that the mainstream media has not reported the truth about what is going on in this world. And they're never likely to report the truth because they are also in the pockets of the main global power brokers. Right? And the alternative media also has not been reporting any of the events which have been happening. The real important events. And this disempowers the American public. It disempowers the British public. It disempowers the public in any country, really, to make well-informed decisions, to understand situations better. Okay? To illustrate this, let me tell you this. Just yesterday, General John Nicholson confirmed that Russia was arming the Taliban. Okay? And the Chinese have been sending more and more troops into Afghanistan in order to try and control that region and that country as well. Added to that, of course, is the issue of Pakistan, which is a nuclear state on the verge of destabilization. And the fact that the Chinese have been funneling money through the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which goes into the pockets of the Pakistani ISI, who then fund terrorist organizations. Okay? But because most people don't know any of this, okay, because they're ill-informed, what happens is that they make snap judgments out of a gut reaction. And I'm not saying that judgment is necessarily wrong. Okay? But they make snap judgments about foreign policy because they do not understand the ins and outs of what is actually going on. So this is why you've ended up with a quagmire, a total mess in Afghanistan, right? Which no one thus far has been able to solve. So it is a massive problem, as I say. But here's the view from a pragmatic point of view, okay? Either America controls the opium fields and the lithium mines and all the other mineral deposits in Afghanistan, or China does. And as I said, that'll lead directly to more acts of terror being committed in the long term. That is actually the truth of the matter, right? That's really how it stands from a pragmatic standpoint. And as I said before many, many times, I have been completely opposed. For those of you who have been watching my videos, who have subscribed to my channel, I've been completely and utterly opposed to any sort of intervention in North Korea and to any sort of military intervention in Syria. Okay? I've stated that very strongly in no uncertain terms because of the ramifications of what would happen thereafter. Okay? That being said, Afghanistan really is a completely different kettle of fish. Okay? That doesn't mean that I agree, by the way, with the sending in of extra troops into Afghanistan. See, I think the whole situation could be handled 1,000,000 times better. But one of the problems is that the American economy has been limping along, partly thanks to the success of the drug trade, of the opium trade. Okay? And that opium doesn't just go into the hands of drug dealers. The money from that doesn't just go into the pockets of drug dealers, but also you'll notice, if you pay very close attention to what's been going on, that various pharmaceutical companies have benefited enormously. Big Pharma has benefited enormously from having direct access at a minuscule cost to all the drugs there. Okay? And I'm talking about the minuscule cost financially. In terms of human lives, though, it has been massive. It has been massive. The loss of British and American lives, of British and American troops in Afghanistan. We've seen them come home in body bags. Okay, those losses were extensive. Okay, and it's this disastrous foreign policy that's been pursued, particularly over the last 8 years, but since George W. Bush decided to go into Afghanistan. Okay, it wasn't the going into Afghanistan that was necessarily wrong. It was having zero strategy for fixing the problem that was at the core of it. Okay, the idea that you could buy loyalty from the Taliban. It does not work. They are not motivated by money. Most human beings, by the way, are not motivated by money. That's an interesting one. If you look at the research of Steven Pinker on this, I think you'll find that really fascinating. And also, what was the chap's name? Was it Dr. Daniel Pink? I could be mistaken on that. But somebody who is really, really well known in the area of heuristics. I think we all know about Kahneman's research and so on. But this gentleman, I think it was Daniel Pink, he wrote a remarkable paper on the fact that most human beings are not motivated by money, right? We're motivated by other things in our life, primarily. And the Afghan Taliban, the point I'm making here is that, as kind of a roundabout way as it is of explaining this, the Afghan Taliban also is not motivated by money. They're motivated by theological beliefs, okay? They truly believe they are on the side of right. They believe they are God's army or Allah's army, okay, who will be victorious over the infidels. I can tell you the origins of the Taliban if you're interested as well, right? If you're not, feel free just to skip ahead, by the way, right? But the origins of the Taliban come from the Taliban in Pakistan, who were inspired, let us call it, by a gentleman by the name of al-Maududi, okay? If you look this guy up, A-L-M-A-U-D-U-D-I, right? You'll find that he has been directly responsible for fomenting terrorist groups and terrorist actions in India, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, and also in Afghanistan as well. Okay? But this is the situation we find ourselves in. Now, as I explained, because the pharmaceutical industry is making so much money out of this, insofar as these State Department moles are concerned, I would call them moles because they do work pretty much for the Russians and the Chinese, right? It's in their best interest to keep the poppy fields going because that's the only thing keeping the American economy going. As I've pointed out many times, it's a false economy based on this bastardized Keynesian economic model, which in itself is based on debt, right? It doesn't work. It's a false economy. But to keep it going, what they had to do was to continue with this supply, this available and ready supply of opium, right? What I would personally do is to burn the poppy fields. And as the US military did part of the way into the war some years ago, we're talking a good 8-9 years ago, they actually used to recompense the farmers afterwards, after burning the poppy fields, right? But then the CIA would come in and do their thing, and private contractors would again end up protecting the poppy fields. You can read about this if you like. I'm sure some of you are already familiar with it. But that would be my way of dealing with the problem. If I had my say, I would suggest doing that, right? And then, after these terror organizations and their financial funding has been cut completely, declare victory and get the hell out. Okay? The problem with the president's statement yesterday is that it leaves open the potential for a revolving conflict, a never-ending conflict, perpetual warfare in Afghanistan. That's what I didn't like about it. Okay, that I despised, because I thought, hang on a second here. If you're in a conflict that has no end in sight, or you're saying that publicly at least, it doesn't give a whole lot of confidence to the troops, it doesn't reinvigorate them or re-energize them, and it doesn't give the American people any confidence in their military and their strategy. Okay, conflicts are supposed to be, you go in there, you do the job, you get out again, after being victorious, hopefully, right? That is the point of military conflict, or at least it should be. And if you ever have to descend into military conflict, this was something Sun Tzu noted in The Art of War. If it ever becomes the case that you have to go to war, then you've already failed in a great many respects. Because you should never have had to go to war in the first place. Had you had the right type of diplomats, had you had the right type of intelligence apparatus, because a whole lot of it is actually, in terms of conflict avoidance, has to do with how good your spies are. And because of a lack of funding, proper funding, and because of a lack of human intelligence, they've been relying too much on signals intelligence, what you end up with are these very exact same type of situations that we're seeing in Afghanistan. And it is, in a great many ways, almost a replay of the Air America scenario. Okay, if you remember that in the Golden Triangle in Vietnam. So this is the big worry, and this is the big problem that a whole lot of people have right now. They are seriously troubled by this troop surge. They are troubled by exactly what the strategy may or may not be in that region, and they don't want to see more of their sons get killed in action. They don't want to see their children get killed in action. Okay, that's the primary concern, I think, of American citizens, because there's been too much of a loss of life. One of the things I would add to this is that, at least, I know this is a small takeaway in some respects, right? But at least it isn't the 30,000 troop surge that President Obama did. The talk that's going around right now is that it's possibly going to be, although it hasn't been definitively declared, 4,000 troops that might be sent into Afghanistan. Okay, I guess that's one possible potential upside. It would be even better if we knew for certain that that was going to be comprised of special forces, special operations forces, okay, who could do the kind of sneak attacks, the kind of very real, who could use the real tactics that I've outlined in order to completely decimate the supply lines of the enemy in a war-type situation, right? And you see, the thing is, I can see this from many, many sides. There is that problem of what would happen if America simply pulled out? Okay, what would happen if America pulled out of Afghanistan just tomorrow, straight away? Well, one of the counter-arguments to that would be that you might see a power vacuum develop in which these organizations, these enemy states, might become further emboldened. Okay? But the counter argument to that, actually, there is a counter argument to that as well, is that, and this would be my argument, it probably would be better to pull out completely, right? To pull out and just concentrate on home defense. Defense at home. Okay? Because what I think would probably work really, really well, and this is just my personal opinion on this, by the way, right? And it would avoid conflict as well. It would avoid escalating the conflict in Afghanistan. It would avoid a necessity for a troop surge. You let China take over Afghanistan. You let them manage the poppy fields and the opium. You let them take the lithium, right? That sounds kind of nuts originally, okay, until you understand. Expansionism cannot work, and right now Russia and China are looking at expansionism, right? That's one of their policies, if you like, in both countries. They want to expand. I explained all of this in the previous video, right? They want to expand in the region, right? So let them, because it means that they then have to shoulder the economic burden of it all, right? Which means that they'd have to finance Afghanistan as a country, just like they're doing with Pakistan. And this is part of the reason why you're seeing the economic slowdown in China. And in fact, what's going to happen is that their economy will eventually collapse if they're not careful, right? Because if they overextend themselves, then what will end up happening is that they won't be able to sustain their presence in those regions, and then again they'll just turn into theocratic states again. So China won't be able to stay there, right? Nobody can stay. Here's the thing about Afghanistan that the US military doesn't understand, that the American intelligence services, I don't think, completely understand. Afghanistan can't be ruled by anyone. It's not that type of country, right? You can't establish stability in Afghanistan. It can't be done. Okay, so even Russia and China are failing miserably, actually, if you take a look at what's happening on the ground, and I can't go into details on this, but they are actually failing. Okay, they can't stabilize those regions. They can't normalize them. It doesn't work. That's the great big secret. So they'd implode, right? Afghanistan would implode. And what that would mean, fundamentally, is that if the US concentrated on beefing up its own national security, right, they'd be able to stop any incoming terror attack. And there's nothing to stop, by the way, these intelligence services from taking out any segment of any terror organization in foreign operations that might pose a threat to national security either. Okay, I'm just pointing that out. So if you concentrate on home defense, right, if you concentrate on defending your nation, literally putting that America First policy in place, it would actually serve the American public very, very well. It would also serve the United States government very well, and it would serve the US military very well. See, tactically and strategically, that is the best option. Okay? But because of all these moving parts, if you like, in terms of the opium trade, in terms of the minerals in Afghanistan and who has control over them, you are seeing this tug of war via proxy wars in Afghanistan between America and her allies, so America, Britain, and France, I think, and Canada, and Australia, and right? So you're seeing these countries on one side, and China financing the other side, right? So you're getting, you're basically getting a proxy war. It's Afghanistan redux again, right? And as I say, the big potential problem is that there could be a growing loss of life there, which is my primary concern. Okay, so I think, on the one hand, I can completely understand, to sum up, I can completely understand why the military-industrial complex thinks that this is a good idea. But personally speaking, I don't think this is a good idea. I've looked at this from many sides, and I can't, because I look at things in terms of the long-term strategies. Okay, I look at things from a long-term perspective. Whereas many people in the military-industrial complex, who are more often than not mistaken, tend to look at things in the short term. Okay? Anyway, those are my thoughts on the subject. Let me know yours. I'd be interested in knowing, because I think we're pretty much all on the same page on this, on the same side, in saying that interventionist policies are probably generally a bad idea. Okay? And the deep state's efforts, if you want to call it that, it's basically just a State Department in true terms. Their efforts usually tend to end up aiding America's enemies rather than hindering them. Okay. Anyway, I wish you all the very best. Thank you very much for watching. Take good care of yourselves, and God bless you.